All right, thank you for coming back to the podcast, everyone. I am joined with a very special guest, someone who is definitely someone I've looked up to throughout the community over the years, and this is a huge thing for me today. So I'd like to introduce Ella Harrison to the podcast, and we're here to talk about some of her practice and her book that she wrote, and I'm just so excited to have her on the podcast. So welcome.
Mel, thank you so much. That's so sweet. That was such a welcoming, nice introduction. Thank you very much for having me. Do I just introduce myself then, I guess?
Like a little bit about yourself and your practice, maybe?
Yeah, cool. So my name is Ella, and I've been a practicing witch for 15 years now. I started off with Wicca, and that's kind of what I started my social media with Wiccan content on YouTube. But then I think in the last, I want to say like 3-4 years, I've moved more to folk magic, specifically German folk magic and folk witchcraft. And so that's what I identify with more now. I have a social and cultural anthropology bachelor. And yeah, I have YouTube and all the platforms basically. And I recently wrote a book, which is called The Book of Spells. I see you have it. Thank you.
I'm obsessed, by the way.
Yeah, so that was really cool. And like quite the like stage in life that is like, what's that called in English? Like just important, I guess, for me personally. It's just really fun. So yeah, thank you again for having me on here. I'm always a little bit nervous with podcasts because I'm like, oh gosh.
It's okay. We have like an even playing field right now because I've been watching your videos for years. So I'm like inside kind of freaking a little bit. But so don't feel nervous. It's okay.
Oh yeah, I feel like that's always interesting when I talk to anyone really, and you really see that kind of like, oh, I'm nervous, you're nervous, we're all nervous, it's all good. But yeah, sometimes it's uh just an interesting experience, I think, to see that dynamic, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. Everyone's a little nervous on the inside, I think, no matter who they are. So I think we can just take a couple breaths and we'll be okay. All right, thank you so much for that intro. To start off, I just wanted to talk about the appearance of the book. It is stunning, by the way. This just reminds me of opening up a fairy tale book. And it's like one of those books like you want to keep forever because it just reminds you of like your childhood. And that's kind of what this reminds me of a little bit, is just like opening up my favorite fairy tale book and then trying all the magical things inside, because I actually started off with folk magic as well and trying things out and creating spells throughout the folk tales that I've learned in my past. So yeah, it definitely like harkens back to a little bit of my childhood, and I have a little of that nostalgia there.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And by the way, the artwork is actually stunning. Like beyond like just the outside of the book, the inside, the illustrations are just absolutely unreal. Like so pretty.
It actually means a lot to me that you said the fairy tale bit and just the nostalgia bit, because my mood board, like my Pinterest board that I had done for the cover and for the entire concept, was literally like fairy tale. Like I've had all these old fairy tale books and covers and stuff, and that was the vibe inside I also wanted, and like the artwork and stuff. Means a lot to me. Thank you. Yeah. Remember that first talk when I talked to DK about it. I was like, my pitch basically was like, imagine a grimoire that you find in like your nana's attic, and you open it up and it's got all this magic and it's kind of old, and it's just this big book of everything. And that's kind of what I pitched, and so that's hopefully kind of made its way across.
Yeah, definitely. I opened it up and I was so surprised to see so many different things, including like soups and tinctures and oils and ointments and all this other stuff that I didn't expect to see. I thought I was going to be seeing like a little bit more of like candle magic and kind of like that kind of thing, but it's just so broad on the different like modalities that you're touching on, and it's really like helped me want to pick up my practice a little bit more tangibly and try things out. Number one would be the witch's ladder for manifestation. I've been wanting to do that for so long, and it definitely, like, it was probably one of the first things that popped out to me, and I was like, oh, this is definitely something I'm going to do, and I'm going to hang it up right in my altar space. And it just like really helped to spark that creativity for myself again.
I love that one. The illustration for that one is really nice, if I may say so.
Yeah.
Yes, that soup is actually my mom's soup recipe.
Aww.
And I remember so excited that I was allowed to like add recipes in there, because there was a couple of family recipes in there.
Oh, that's so awesome. So it really is kind of like your own grimoire there from your family's practices and their recipes. That's so cool.
I want to sneak that in and just also kind of, honestly, that's the thing. Like, I feel like I've never been very good at writing my own book of shadows. Like, I know everyone's always, and I've myself always been like, you have to write into your grimoire or book of shadows or witch's journal, whatever, you know, you want to call it. And I never do it. And I'm like, this is it. This is my personal grimoire. I don't have to have a book of shadows anymore, because it's just
You just have everything in there now, and it, like, what a better way to go about it. It's beautifully done, and you don't have to be crafty now. You don't have to write in it every day.
But yeah, so that was really a passion project for sure, and like just such a dream. So I'm really glad that it's being received and being loved really well, I think.
Oh, good. I am too, because definitely this is something that I'm going to have on my shelf for years and just keep referring to. It's just a great way to like sit down after the end of the day and you're feeling really burnt out, and just like flip through the pages and re-inspire yourself again. After like getting up at 4 a.m. and then coming home, I don't feel like I want to practice. I feel like I reserve it a lot for my days off. And I noticed if I just pick it up off the kitchen table or something like that, I am able to re-spark myself and want to try something. So I have been doing that. One is I tried your prosperity tea. So I have my little blend right here. Yeah, so I'm drinking that today, and this is so delicious, by the way. Oh my gosh, I love it.
Thank you. Yeah, important for me, just mundane magic, like into everything, muffins and recipes, and just, yeah, because I think that's really important for me in my practice, is because I know people are like, oh, do you practice every day? And I'm like, yeah, because I don't separate witchcraft from my mundane everyday life. And I have that in that book too, so that was really special. Thank you.
I've already started to annotate the book a little bit, because I wanted to point out a few things that I really loved about it. And one of the first things I really noticed that not a lot of books actually do is that you define magic and clarify common misconceptions within the craft and what beginners tend to face. And I think that's really important, because especially with such a beautiful book, I know beginners like to circle towards something as aesthetic as this and take up everything without a grain of salt. So being able to redefine things and just flush out those things before they could become a problem for someone, I think is really awesome. And I also noted that I love that you have a correspondence list for replacements of herbs and like ingredients. I find when I try to do something in a book, sometimes I can't find something that replaces that item for that modality. And I really appreciate that in this book.
Thank you. Yeah, that was one of the things I was like, when I talked again to them, literally the first very Zoom call that we had, or a Google Hangout or whatever it was, I was like, it needs to have a correspondence list at the back. Like, it needs to. I will not write this book if it's not with a correspondence list at the back.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really nice. It's easy to like jump around. I found sometimes with correspondence lists, they're hard to understand and they kind of flip you through so many pages, but this is really straightforward and I really appreciated that. So as someone who's a fellow book nerd, I just wanted to say I really appreciated that.
Thank you. Yeah, there was one section that they cut and I'm still slightly heartbroken over it. It was a glossary. I had like, I think I want to say 2, like an entire spread basically of just glossary with like more defining things of like terminology, but because of word count, it was cut. But I think it's fine. Yeah, that one was just a little bit like, oh no.
Oh, that's okay. You could always write your own book of correspondences too, and then just have everything that you want. Have it
Oh,
corresponding with your book. You never know.
that's an idea.
So I wanted to know what prompted you to want to write a book. Is that something you've always wanted to do, is be an author?
Yeah, so I feel like one of the biggest things for me is it kind of came out of like a place of like, and I think I've seen authors mention this multiple times where it's like, oh, I wanted a book that was like this, and there was none, so I made it. And I feel like that's true for me too. Where it's like, I want a beginner-friendly book that an advanced practitioner could pick up as well, and that's going to include, certain foundational things that I think are important. Like one of the things that kind of bugged me in some of the books, and I don't want to slander any books or anything like that at all, but certain books where I was like, okay, this is jumping right into the spells without giving a little bit of a foundation, where I was like, you need a little bit of an understanding of how magic works. And I mean, I only touched upon very briefly like the microcosm and the macrocosm, and obviously that's just one potential theory for how magic works, right? Like there's so many, but I wanted to just kind of give a little bit of like, some of the things that I think are important that then someone can individually like research. But I also wanted to make it very accessible, because a lot of spell books that I have or that I've seen include these really difficult to get ingredients, or ingredients that are just not, local to you, or they offer no kind of like alternatives. And so I just wanted it to be something that is more personalized and more like accessible, I guess. And like a lot of times I have grocery store ingredients, and like if I have one regret, it's probably the amount of essential oils that I use in the book, where I'm like, oh, I could have maybe switched it up for like hard ingredients like hard herbs, which people can still hopefully do anyway, even if it says jasmine oil. Just use jasmine or whatever instead, if you want. But yeah, that was kind of where I was coming from with that book. And I think, secretly, maybe not so secretly, I think a lot of people are like, oh, I would love to have a book. So I didn't need much inspiration on that end. I think I was always like, oh, I would love to write a book, because, like I was that, kid when I was younger. I would write short stories. And I think a lot of people tend to be that way, where we write short stories and then we grow up and we're like, oh, it would be nice to have a book one day.
Yeah, it's definitely somebody, like so many people's dreams, like to secretly to be an author, or they keep a catalog of things like I do. I have like 4 ideas that I want to publish one day, but right now I have to focus on other things. So I definitely relate to like that call of wanting to put something creative out in the world, especially because I think practitioners of magic are just so creative to begin with, and it's just another outlet. So for me, I definitely, if I ever do a book, I definitely want to do like an entire spell around it. So the entire book is a spell. So it's a massive thing. Um, I don't know. I definitely wanted to do something like that, where I'm stepping out of my comfort zone and the entire project was spell.
Oh yeah, that's a really cool idea. I mean, I will say it's a lot of work, but I feel like you were just so proud. Like even before it was published, and I remember when it was completely done and everything was finalized, you just get that sense of like being so proud of like, I guess.
Mhm.
Yeah, I feel like, I'm going to say definitely go for it. Like that sounds like an amazing project.
Thank you. Okay, let's see. So if you were to describe your book in a few words, what would you describe it as, if you could pick 2 or 3 words?
Oh gosh, complete guide. um, yeah, I guess the the book you find in the attic that is just filled with magic. Um, I guess maybe, yeah.
That's beautiful. What would you say is your favorite spell in the book? I know it's really hard to like choose. Maybe even just choose like a topic like money magic or prosperity or protection or something like that. What's your favorite
Mhm.
spell in that genre?
Oh gosh. Okay, so I feel like I really like the Return to Sender. Because we had the discussion about baneful magic and we decided not to include it, but I fought for that one because I wrote that one and it was more spicy. And then the editor, she was like, "Oh, isn't this a little too spicy? I think we might have to cut that." And I was like, "No, no, no, let me rewrite it. I can make it less spicy." So I'm like proud of that one just because I have like that emotional attachment, I guess, to it. I also liked and I'm really like fond of the like communicating with ancestors.
Yeah.
That I think yeah, I don't know, I just like that one because it's one of the ones that I personally have um really enjoyed doing a lot of times. Like a lot of these spells in here are spells that I haven't necessarily done as much. Like for example, the new boss, not new boss, the new job spell, for example, right? Like that's something that I don't do every so often, whereas the communication with ancestors is much more prevalent, for example, in my practice. So, and then I have a couple of food recipes that I'm very fond of, like that soup one, because it's like my mom's recipe. But yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to try that one. I don't think I've checked on that one yet. I'm almost halfway through, so I'm just definitely gonna have to go back in and like try a few out. I actually want to do a little bit of a series on the channel, if it's okay with you, where I try out some of your spells and like talk about the manifestation successes.
Oh my, that would be such an honor. That would be so cool. I think that would probably like make me cry watching that. Oh, you.
Awesome, cool. I definitely will do it then because it's something I wanted to test out. I was like, I've seen that online where people are trying out people's books and their spells, and I was like, oh, I don't really have a book I want to try that with, but now I do.
Thank you. Yeah. Oh, that's really. Oh, thank you. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh,
So I know you grew up with around the craft, and I was wondering if it's something that you feel comfortable with sharing. What's one of your favorite childhood spiritual memories that you have with your family?
with my family. Interesting. Um. Hmm. That's a good question. I think stories are really important to me. We have a lot of family, especially spirit kind of stories, where um, we have certain family members that have passed that come through, and I love hearing those stories being shared with my family. Like whenever we kind of get together, and even recently, my cousins came from because they're Australian, and so they visited us. And again, we kind of just started sharing like spirit stories of family members, and that was really special. So I love those. Um, Let me think. There's one specific story. Oh, I have a couple. That's the thing. I feel like there's a couple of like, let's say, paranormal stories.
Cool.
Um, One I actually shared on my YouTube, but it's more of like it's not a positive story necessarily. Uh, I don't know. It's really hard for me to pinpoint just because there's a couple, and I also have really horrible memory. I'm sure, tomorrow I'll be like, I should have mentioned that story. Yeah, I think just spirit stories and just sharing grandpa or great grandpa or great grandma stories, and then getting the sense of that person sitting right next to you, where you're like, oh, look, he's here. And everyone in the room can feel it, and it's just a very overwhelming sense of like, wow, that's really, really phenomenal always. And I guess it's just really nice. Something that I think is important in and I really, really highly regard my mom for this, especially my family, is never because I think a lot of times when kids grow up, they have stories of their imaginary friend, and then at some point parents are like, yeah, but that's not real, right? I never had that, where I think that helped me keep that intuition open and really be able to foster that spiritual kind of connection. And my parents have always just, in my family in general, my oma, my grandma, and my mom especially, have just always been really, really amazing with encouraging it instead of, maybe not encouraging it.
Oh, that's awesome. See, I love that so much because I know I grew up in a very like psychically like gifted family, but I feel like they never recognized those things. they just had like a knowing a lot of the times, but then they would shut things down because of their logical mind. So growing up, I would have weird things come up, like for myself, I had this weird thing come up, I guess it would be paranormally, where I walked into the living room and my grandmother was wallpapering with all these like flowers on it in the late 90s. And I was like, oh, this looks just like my house back when I lived in England. And I was like 5 or something. Never lived anywhere outside Canada. And it was so weird that like later on when I grew up, my grandma shared that it was her grandmother, very similar to her grandmother when she was younger. She lived there. So it was weird. I'm like, I don't know. Am I like reincarnated?
Yeah. Oh, that's really sweet. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really nice.
Are important.
Yeah, and it's really nice to like see someone's family like really support them with those types of things. Because like in my family, they were like, yeah, we believe in it and all that, but we're not calling it that. And sometimes we'll also put doubt in you. So I know like for myself, I shut down a lot of that stuff, and I'm just starting to like try to reopen that a lot because it scared me. I'm like, okay, so it's not what I think it is. So what is this thing? So I definitely appreciate people who are able to let somebody grow and flourish with that kind of ability and like allow them to sit comfortably within it.
Yeah, exactly. Just allowing the space.
Yeah, for sure. I know you started off with Wicca. So how has your practice changed over time? I know the Wiccan practices definitely are like a given. But is there anything that stands out to you that has changed within your practice now that you've kind of moved away from that?
I think one of the biggest things for me, and I've got this tattooed. I have harm none as a tattoo.
Nice.
Whereas, yeah, and so now, and I just obviously was saying, now I'm very pro hex and like get them, obviously if the time is right, nuanced,
Yeah.
of course, so I think maybe that is probably the biggest, like I think if Ella from 10 years ago could see me now and be like, oh, okay. So maybe that, but I think, maybe the other one is like the amount of bones that I now work with and use in my practice. I'm not sure. I feel like I've always had an interest in the more oddities kind of realm, but I feel like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I mean, okay, then again, I was like 11, right? Obviously, it's going to be different.
Yeah.
But even just 5 years ago, I probably would have been like, that's a particular interesting, especially because I used to be vegan. So
yes.
Adding another layer where I was like, that's a lot of furs on your altar and a lot of bones that you've got there. So maybe that.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so definitely an interesting change for sure. I know I've seen that within myself where I of course like started off with like a Wiccan flavored practice, not knowing what it was, because that's all really that was really out there for me at the time. And then I really discovered what Wicca was, and I'm like, yes, that's my thing. But then I realized that the main values for myself, especially with like the hexing and all that stuff, did not align for me. And it was definitely something that I was like, okay, this is something that's like pushing me down the right path, but maybe this is not my stop. I need to keep going. And that's when I kind of like pushed myself into like folk magic and leaning off of like my heritage and maybe even a little bit more of like chaotic magic and trying those kind of things. And it definitely settled in so much better for me once I realized what path works for me. So it definitely is a journey, and I know everyone's path will change and wind as they grow. So I definitely wanted to like pinpoint that, especially for the beginners who are starting off. Just know that you don't have to define yourself, because these things will change as you grow and discover new things, and what describes you best right now might not be the same within 6 months.
Yeah, exactly. Like, don't put too much pressure on yourself in that regard. Just go with the flow.
Exactly. Now, this one's a little bit fun because it's something that I always like to talk about with my friends who are into spirituality. So myself, my favorite elements are fire and water, and it's interesting because it actually correlates within my birth chart. That I have a lot of those aspects within other areas that I'm not rolled in. So it's really interesting. So I was wondering, what do you have a favorite element to work with for certain things, or do you like lean into certain elements?
I feel like that is one of those things that I've noticed change for me over time. Um, and I think it also just depends on my like mood. I'm a Scorpio, so I like hot water. um, so water, I think, but obviously Scorpio is one of those interesting ones where people are like, "Why are you not in the desert? Why are you not fire?" So
Yeah.
I say hot. Um, I also am Aquarius and Gemini, and so like Aquarius moon, Gemini rising. So I like air and I like ideas and philosophy and stuff like that a lot. But I hate the wind. Like we are in Riga and it's a very windy city and it bugs me to no end because it's just very frustrating when you're trying to go out and you can't really wear what you want to wear because your hair just goes over the place. But that with I tend to work with candles a lot. And I do like earth. So I tend to not work with either water or air that much. Um, and I tend to gravitate towards fire and earth a lot. However, fire scares the absolute shit out of me. I hope it's okay.
Oh yeah, I got
Um,
you. This is not a
okay.
crime podcast. It's okay.
I had a couple of like near death experiences with fire when I was younger, so fire scares me. Um, but at the same time, I do appreciate a good fire. It's one of those like duality sort of moments there for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I can see that. And it's weird because I have a bit of the same thing with water. So I grew up in Alberta, Canada, and we would go to BC, British Columbia, to visit my great grandmother and help her through storm windows and all of that. And they had these massive waterfalls just a little bit outside of Kimberley. And we would go visit them all the time and walk the paths. But I was absolutely terrified of the entire waterfall. I would not come off the path to go down onto like the bay area, I guess it would be called, or the corner of the water. And I would always have these nightmares like leading up to going to Kimberley that I was drowning in the waterfall. So it's just like a thing, and it was just like an always a reoccurring thing, and I would not even know about the trip coming up, but I would just start dreaming about it, and then we would go and I would have it every single night, or falling off the cliff next to the house. And so like heights and like water are just not a thing for me, but I love working with water, and you can never get me out of it.
Yeah. Yeah, same. I think because I mean, I was born in New Zealand, so I love water and like the ocean and H2O, just that water. Like I was obsessed. I'm still obsessed with mermaids.
Yeah, me too.
I'm just gonna move the camera a little bit closer. That's fine. But yeah, so I feel like that's an interesting one because I think we have interesting relations with the elements. But I think also working through certain fears is like part of that journey.
Yeah,
For more tea too.
I definitely agree. Oh, I need to have that on my desk.
Yeah. Just recently bought it and I hate tea. I cannot drink tea unless it's fruit tea with a lot of honey.
Yummy. Yeah, I like the juicy teas.
Yeah, so I'm trying to, and I do enjoy a tea occasionally. Like I have, I love like psychic teas. I have that in my book, obviously, as well. But I can't just drink it without a purpose. Like I only drink tea if I'm sick or if I'm trying to achieve something.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm definitely gonna have to try that psychic tea because I'm trying to open that up again. I've been actually like leading on to that. I've actually been like experiencing like audible things that I've never had before. I would always just have like this clear knowing. But my mother recently passed this last year, and I was hearing her voice
Oh,
calling me twice in one evening. So I heard her a total of 3 times. And then I just actually heard her when I was at work yesterday, and it was just so weird because like like the indescribable voice that you know of, and then you're like, what? And it pulls you out of what you're doing. And I looked around and I was like, oh, that's weird. And I never had that before. So I definitely know that things are starting to open up, and I want to see if I can lean into more of that and like start developing maybe even a site if I could. Because I know I used to see things in my childhood bedroom and it would freak me the heck out. So I would shut that all down. So now I'm feeling more comfortable with it, and it would make me feel more comfortable to be able to see and that kind of thing. So I definitely want to like lean into that a little bit and see if the tea can help.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like with that, I get exactly what you're talking about, because I also have that voice that sometimes calls me. Usually it's only right before I fall asleep. So you're obviously in that very liminal space. And it always sounds like it is a female voice, and it always sounds like it's either my mom or my grandma. Similar, voice is similar, and it sounds like it's in another room and that she's calling me and it's just my name, and then I snap out of it and I'm like, ah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I
But
had the same thing. I was actually the first time that I started hearing it, I heard her when I was in the bathroom getting ready for bed, just washing my face and everything. And then I laid down that night and I was in that space of going to sleep, and then I could hear her calling me 2 more times. And then I felt on the side of my head like a motherly like touch.
oh,
And I kind of like feel like the energetics of it. It felt like an electrostatic kind of vibraty feel. It was really sweet and interesting because I've never experienced that before.
yeah, I feel like a good rule of thumb that I, as advice, would always give, because I know my mom has been having experiences and I gave her this advice, is set ground rules. Like I have ground rules whenever a spirit wants to come through, they're more than welcome to, but try not to do anything that would make me jumpy.
Yeah.
If you want to give me any kind of signs or anything like that, maybe make it more gentle, because I'm a very jumpy person.
Yeah.
So maybe the keys off the table or just pop up, because I think that would scare me a little bit, like make me jump.
Yeah.
So that's maybe something to just put out there. Like literally, I just vocalize it like, this is the ground rule. Might open it up well.
Yeah, definitely. I might have to, if you are experienced with getting rid of certain spirits, I would love to pick your brain with that too, because I have some type of energy in here and I don't know if it's like the energy of the house or if it's a brownie or something like that, or if it is something that I don't want here. But it's literally like a horror movie. It's like the little girl with blonde hair and blue eyes peeking around the corner. My boyfriend sees it. I don't.
Okay.
But it freaks me
Oh.
out. And it doesn't like to listen to the rules.
Interesting. I feel like with something like that, my thing, I like the Ouija board, and I know some people don't like the Ouija board. But opening up like a communication, even with tarot, and just being like, who are you, and is there anything that you want?
Mhm.
Because spirits, in my opinion, are just there to like fuck with us.
Yeah.
And other ones, like they, you don't know if that spirit maybe is feeling lonely, or maybe they just want a couple of cookies every Friday.
Mhm.
And they're appeased. I feel like sometimes all it takes is just reaching out and being like, what are you here for? What do you want? So that's what I would do first. And if you're done seeing that spirit is being a little bit of a menace, and you do want to kind of cleanse that space, that would take more effort, I would say. Could be done as well. It just depends, because at times I think these spirits probably are also like, who are you? You're in my house.
That's true. And it's like you don't know what their perception is on the other side of it. They could be living in an entirely different like plane of existence, and they don't normally see us, and then we pop up and freak them out. So who knows, right? All right, I'll
Yeah.
definitely have to like take that into consideration, because I had a lot of problems. I know there were several spirits within this house, and I actually had to get my friend Corey to help do a spiritual astral cleanse with an energy that he works with, and that more negative energy is gone. That used to mess with my boyfriend. It would just torment him, and it was awful. And like we would feel the two energies. One was more of like a playful, like I don't want to listen, but I'm a child. kind of energy. I'm not going to hurt you, but I'm curious. And then there was another one that was a little bit more like it fed off of fear. So I know that energy is gone now. So that makes more sense than just like listen to the rules. Because if it's a child or even just someone, it's their home, maybe they just want a little bit more understanding. So I will definitely try that.
Yeah, try it out, see how it goes. I mean, you can always also just message me if you want.
I would love that because like I'm not super into like that realm of spirit work. I work more with plants and like land spirits. So when it comes to spirit of humans, it's a little different for me. For sure.
I get that. I think a lot of people, I think, have that experience where it's like, oh, different.
Yeah.
But yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's see here. Okay, so this one's fun too. So if you were to have a trip and be able to travel somewhere, what are your like must-have tools and crystals, herbs, those kind of things to have with you as a traveling altar or just a comfort bag or something like that?
So I don't really do the entire like traveling altar. The only thing I take with me is my tarot cards, and I have a favorite crystal. And that tends to be it. Just because usually when I travel, I tend to try and like experience the trip and be in the moment. And so depending on what type of travel it is, we went to Greece last year. I visited my best friends, they're Greek. And that was purely just like not related to magic at all. We just went to go be on an island, drink, drinks at a bar, go to the beach. Like, I only brought my tarot cards. And I didn't end up even using them. But I just like to have them because sometimes it's nice because they sometimes might want to have a reading then or something. Like I've done readings for them before. But yeah, if it is a trip where, example, I go visit my family home, which is in Bavaria, in southern Germany, I will take my favorite crystal. I'll take my tarot cards. I'll take my journal, just because I like to journal things and I like to pick up things and sketch them and stuff like that because I like to draw. And honestly, that's again it because I just like to experience the place. So I don't really take much, I think. My tarot cards is the one thing I always have with me.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, it's definitely for me something I constantly bring. I actually want to get a miniature deck so I'm not wrecking the ones that I use every day. Because I tend to like to carry them in my bag and everything everywhere I go. So I have them at work and everything. For myself, I'm a bit of an oil person. So I usually have 3 or 4 oils on me at all times. So I have like a protection oil, like a veiling thing. And then I have like a good sleep oil. I have a energy, like it's like a boosting magical energy oil for ritual. And then I have a deity oil, whichever one I'm working with currently. So I usually have like a little bag of them. And that's basically all I bring is my oils and my tarot. And then that way I can at least use the correspondences within the oils if I'm staying somewhere I'm not familiar with. I am doing sigils everywhere.
Yeah, I do air sigils everywhere too.
Oh, that's a
Definitely.
good one too. I do that on all my doors. Like I think I have over like upwards of 100 sigils at any time. So it's one of my favorite practices.
That, and I think you could probably, if you wanted to put an effort, and if I had like a Joe from You character trying to like find my tracks, you could find me because I, on every surface that I can, when it's like steamy or foggy, I do like a rune for protection. So I'm pretty sure every hotel that if you followed me, you'd be able to find that.
Oh, that's so funny. That's a good idea too, especially with like public mirrors. That's something I didn't realize. And I started learning more about mirrors because I was having weird things happen in my room. We had double door mirrors that are like our closet doors, and we had a mirror of a fountain. So we were creating like a portal
Uh-huh.
there. So we were having a lot of weird stuff happen. And I was learning about locking the mirrors and all of that stuff. And then I learned like a certain belief where you don't want to look directly into a mirror that other people use in the public because they're pushing their emotions into it. And if they're having a bad day, you could reflect that back to yourself. So immediately that day I went to work and I like locked all of our mirrors at work.
I think mirror is really fascinating. It's a lot of cultures have that too, where they put the cloth over the mirror if someone has passed away in the family, so that they don't get trapped in the mirror. That's very, very watered down, obviously, but there's I feel like that's a really interesting one to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's definitely one thing I have to do every time I go anywhere is I'm locking the mirrors and, and the walls and stuff like that. But okay, let's see. So if you were to choose one ritual for prosperity, what would be your go-to ritual?
I like offerings, but I do a lot of spirit contracts, especially more lately. So for prosperity, I just do a good old milk and honey offering out in nature, and be like, hello, please bring me not options, opportunities. And it's worked really, really well for me, where I do those spirit contracts where I'm like, hi, I'll bring you this offering. Can you bring me opportunities? And I've had really, really amazing results with that, especially lately. Milk and honey is my go-to just because I feel like that's one of those traditional ones. And yeah, so I think that. And if not that, then just a nice good old green candle with some like basil and cinnamon. That's a nice quick and easy one as well.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, I love that. I actually used to use milk and honey a lot when I was giving offering to Faye, because I love the sweet stuff. So that's definitely something I should try. I have also put that into gardens too myself, is like my first offering into the garden of the year. I do a milk and honey and a sugar rub, and I put it into the garden with a bit of eggshell.
Aw. Yeah, also beer or meat, technically. So here in Latvia, we can still get honey meat and like that sort of stuff. And it's really old, from like 12,000, and yeah, 12th century, I guess.
Oh wow.
Piece. And so I like that too, because I'm like, they would have liked this. Maybe they even did like this, you know? And they tend to do well as well.
Oh, amazing. Okay, I'll definitely think on that. I don't know what I could get here, but um it's different here. It's a little bit more harsh weather and everything like that. I don't even know if we still keep things like that from so long ago, but I think that would be interesting to look into and see like the different recipes that people used to make for themselves, especially because like around here we have a lot of indigenous peoples who lived here first. So we maybe even making a bannock or something and offering to them. I think that would be good too, because I'm also Cree, so maybe even offering that to like my family or something like that. That would be a good one to offer, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like it's really just a kind of nice kindness to show them, to have a look what they would have enjoyed, or what they did in the past, and see if you can do something similar. And be like, here you go. That's maybe potentially one of the foods that you really enjoyed, or some of the drinks that you really enjoyed. Or just maybe even an act of kindness that they would have appreciated, like just cleaning the forest or something like that, and using that offering where it's like taking care of their land.
Yes, definitely. That's something for me. I think when I do launch my website, is something that I want to incorporate is an offering donation to the waterways, because they're so underprotected, and it's just something that's so important to everything, and especially to us now and back then. So that's one thing. And then I do eventually want to figure out how to plant a tree with every purchase. So
Yeah.
that's something I want to be able to do, is like re-establish like the forests that have been so drastically like cut down in this area. I think we have like one major area where we have a reserve that like is pretty untouched, but the rest of it is just city around it, and it makes me sad. So I wanted to like put as many trees up as possible.
Yeah, I feel like That's a really, really nice way to give back. It's just, as you said, like planting a tree or waterways protection and things like that. I'm big on that sort of stuff too, definitely. So I get that.
Yeah, awesome. So if what would be your number one way to ground and center yourself? I'm always interested in looking at different ways to find a way to like ground yourself and reconnect to yourself, because so many people it doesn't work the same way. And one of the major things that I started off with within my practice was meditation, and I actually started going out and getting certifications for that to be a teacher, because I was so passionate about meditation. It did so much for me. So I was wondering, what is one of your favorite ways to help recenter yourself and connect to the energies of the earth?
Oh, I have ADHD, so I can't really do meditation unless it's active meditation. So I like to draw. That's my form of active meditation. But if I want to ground and center, I walk barefoot in nature. That's my go-to, like just touching a tree. Especially, I'm very big on the idea of like unloading that energy and almost like like getting hit by lightning, and then that channels through to the earth. And if you wear plastic shoes or not, yeah, any kind of shoes that have a sole that has like plastic, you are protected, let's say, because plastic doesn't conduct and stuff. And so I think of it in the way that we get pent up with all that energy, and so walking barefoot is like unloading that energy and actually allowing that to discharge. Is that how you would say it in English?
Yeah.
Or yeah, that sort of thing. And then if I can't do that because it's freezing outside, I like to take a bath, because again, water I think has that kind of quality where it can just kind of cleanse you and remove any of that energy, and then it just goes down the drain.
Yeah, that's a really good one, actually. I like that. I do that a lot too myself, but it's more of like a forest bathing thing. In this area that's like so woodsy and sticks, and like there's so much stuff I can't really do barefoot unless there's a field. But I like to do forest bathing, where I'm just connecting to the canopies of the trees and basking in that. So it's one of my favorite things to do, and try to find like a magical spot within the forest. I know I found a couple like fey portals where it would be like an entrance into their world, where I'm like, that's just definitely something where they would enter there. So
Nice. Yeah, I feel like I think coming back to nature is a thing I would love to see more in our community. Even with myself, I'm sometimes like, I'm such a hypocrite. I'm just out here like doing nothing but altar work, and I'm like, I should be more in nature. So like that is a focus I have for myself, at least.
yeah, same here. Like I think I've spent the majority of time since summer ended outside. Was probably like 2 days ago, and I spent like a morning like outside on the deck, because I just, when I come home I'm so tired and I just want to be inside because it's cold. But it's not so cold where I can't just like go outside and enjoy like a walk, I'm just being lazy. So it's definitely something I have to push myself into a little bit more.
Same.
So if you were to, I know you don't like tea unless it's fruity. So if you were to have like a fruity tea or something with a deity or a witch from history, who would you choose and why? Do you ask any question to?
Such a good question. Uh, that's a really good question. I want to say my great great grandma, because she was a midwife.
Oh, cool.
And so I know that, and not only was she a midwife, she was an atheist in times of Catholicism, or so I'm told. So I feel like there's a little bit of, I don't think the word witch, because we can't apply those terms to people back then. But I feel like it is a little bit magical. And so I would love to chat to her and just pick her brain, I think, and be like,
Yeah,
so,
so cool.
so just that, I think. I mean, obviously, it would be really interesting to talk to some of the more well-known ones, like Doreen Valiente would be interesting for sure. But I feel like for me personally, it makes more sense to have a look at someone, my family members, to be like, how did you do things? Especially if I want to do German folk magic.
Mhm.
I'd love to just write everything down.
I would love that too. Actually, now that I'm diving back into like some of my family history, and I was so focused on like my indigenous side and maybe just a little bit of the Irish Scottish from my father, but I completely disregarded the German ancestry because my mom was part German and part Métis. So I just discovered that again, that my grandfather was also German, and that's something that I want to like explore more into the folktales. And that's why I'm so excited about your podcast, because like I love listening to different folktales about things, and I'm definitely gonna have to like poke your brain a little bit about resources that you're finding and stuff like that, because I know you're kind of on that same journey right now too.
Yeah, definitely cool. Yeah. I feel like it's interesting to just dive back, let's say, into your history, because I feel like it starts making a lot of sense for things that you have prevalent today. You start realizing things just adding up.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So one thing I do want to start asking everyone who's on the podcast is kind of like my new signature question is what's making you feel connected to your craft right now? What's making you feel really witchy?
Ooh, that's a really good question.
Yeah.
Um, I think right now is I have a house spirit here that um I smell really. I'm very, what's that word? Sentient. Like I'm really good with smelling stuff, I guess. And so that one is, it's a really interesting smell. It's a very distinct smell that just pops up all of a sudden. And whenever that pops up, I'm like, ah yes, hello. And that makes me feel very connected right now, I guess. Yeah. It's just really nice and wonderful to sometimes get that random smell and be like, you're there.
Oh, that's awesome. It's like a really nice way to like say, hey, I'm here. Is like very gentle. Is it's not as much as like a touch or something like that. So it's just like a hey, gentle nod. Hey, I'm here with you. That's beautiful.
Yeah, exactly. So that, also dreams. I think I dream, I connect a lot through dreams, and dreams is where I see a lot of like messages come through. And so I have a very active dream journal. So I like that too.
Oh, that's awesome. That's actually something I wanted to start off with. I started journaling with bullet journals. It's because I couldn't get myself to work in my book of shadows. I have a giant one from a beautiful couple that hand pressed them. They're an LGBT plus couple, and they're just amazing from the States. But I'm too scared to write in it yet until I really, really finalize everything. So I started a few pages, but now I'm doing bullet journaling, and it's really started to put together my book of shadows, like so much more, pulling all these different notes that I have from all over the place and like actually concising them down into something that I find is really fun. And I kind of do paintings in it too now because I'm really into like the painting and drawing. So that's really fun. But I really want to do a dream journal too. Once now that I like started like working on my tarot journal, I want to do a dream journal because I do get a lot of weird dreams. Even just one last night. So like I want to kind of like dive down into like the different like signs and symbologies that I personally carry and see what those are in my dreams so that I can carry them into like the waking world.
Yeah, I feel like it's really fascinating to start looking at dreams.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and you start like looking into like different stories throughout like history and like the different symbols for them and their cultural context. It's really interesting how one thing can be some completely different to another. And like, for example, I just had a dream a couple months ago where I had a couple snakes, and one I'm terrified of snakes, at least like in reality. I think they're cute, but I'm scared of them. But I'm also a snake in the Chinese zodiac, and
Oh,
I had a dream about one who was off in the field, and then one was like going down this desert path, and basically I saw one on a tree molting its skin, And then I was scared of them at first, but I realized that I think that the snake is my protector, because one veered off into the path and went after something. And then the other one was symbolizing transformation and change. So it was really interesting to look at that, because normally that would be a scary dream for me. But I was like, okay, that's like one of my spirit animals that are like more of a protecting energy for me. So I found that really interesting once I started diving into it.
Definitely. I feel like that's really a great way to look at our kind of unconscious and like just what's coming through. Definitely.
Yeah, for sure. So my last question is, if you had your ideal day to do any type of ritual, your entire day to like focus on your favorite holiday, what would be your ideal day and your process for that? What would you like to focus on? What's your favorite holiday that you do your ritual for?
So I love, oh gosh. If I used to really love Mabon, or any kind of autumn equinox and Samhain, All Hallows Eve kind of holidays. However, I, now living in Latvia, really, 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 really adore the midsummer celebration that they have here, because it's a very Baltic pagan way of doing it. And so I love their way of celebrating midsummer, which there's a couple of different parts to it. You make a flower crown. The flowers have significance to each different flower. You go, there's this like, it's like a banya, which is like sauna, and then they smack you with like birch or oak leaves, which is both cleansing but also like cleaning. And then you go into the lake, the water, and things like that. So you take a usually naked bath, and you jump over the fire to cleanse yourself again. And there's also the ritual where you go with your partner into the forest to look for a magical fern flower, which is of course a metaphor for doing it in the bushes.
Awesome.
And everything, Um, so yeah, that's just a ritual I really like, and I like how they celebrate it here because it's a national holiday. It's the biggest holiday here in Latvia, and I really, really appreciate that, and I really like that. So maybe that.
Oh, that's beautiful. I actually really love Midsummer myself. I find it more important to me than Valentine's Day is here, because I don't really vibe with it as much. For me, that's like my reconnection with my partner on that day, for sure. That's a really beautiful ritual. I really love sauna, actually. I used to work at a spa that we had sauna and steam. Actually, I was just thinking when you were talking about that, I was like, oh, I can create this ritual. It may not all be in one spot, but I could do all those things. I just might have to travel to different spots throughout the city and then go to like one of the lakes that we have outside of the city and do that. That'd be fun.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all of your experiences with our listeners, and I really enjoyed having you on the podcast. And is there anything that you want the listeners to know, where they can find you, all of that?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It was really fun. As for any socials, well, you can find me as Ella Harrison on YouTube, on Instagram, TikTok. What else there? Patreon. So the Patreon community is really important for me. And there's also Ella Harrison. I do monthly workshops over there, as well as like articles and stuff. It's a little bit more in depth. And that's where I do more like German folk magic and things like that too. So my Patreon. And of course my book is purchasable basically on like everywhere. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, awesome. Thank you so much for joining us.